We often think our deepest suffering comes from what is actually happening to us right now. But if you look closely at your own life, you'll likely notice a different pattern. The heaviest pain usually comes from replaying events that have already ended. Someone makes a cutting remark on a Tuesday, and we are still arguing with them in the shower 3 weeks later. A project fails at work, and we spend months punishing ourselves for a misstep that everyone else has already forgotten. When we do this, we create a strange illusion. Physically, we are completely safe, standing squarely in the present moment. But mentally, we are still standing at the exact scene of the crime, dragging around a massive invisible weight. If we want to stop exhausting ourselves, we have to learn how to tell the difference between a physical reality we need to deal with and a self-inflicted mental echo. To see exactly how this works, we can look at an old story about two Zen monks traveling through the rain-soaked hills of ancient Japan. The older monk, Koji, was a man of deep, practiced calm. His traveling companion, Ryu, was younger and incredibly rigid. Both men lived under strict monastic laws. The most absolute of these rules was a sacred vow that forbade them from making any physical contact with a woman. Their journey forced them to cross a swollen, muddy river. Standing right at the turbulent edge was a helpless young woman in a fine silk kimono, completely unable to cross the rushing water on her own. The situation forced an immediate choice. The monks had to decide between upholding their strict religious doctrine or helping another human being who was right in front of them. Ryu didn't hesitate to protect his vows. He immediately turned his head away and marched straight past the woman, leaving her stranded. Koji took a completely different path. Without a second thought, he walked up to her, lifted her into his arms, and waded directly into the freezing, muddy current. He carried her safely to the opposite bank, set her down gently on dry land, and simply kept walking as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. The entire physical event lasted maybe 30 seconds. Once she was safely across, the interaction was completely resolved in the physical world. Hours passed. The rain eventually stopped, and the afternoon sky cleared. But the quiet environment masked what was actually happening inside the minds of the two men. Koji was completely at peace. He had acted on a pure instinct to help, and because his conscience was clear, his mind moved on the moment his feet hit the dry road. Ryu, however, was in turmoil. He was locked in a state of absolute shock and outrage that his older brother had so casually broken a sacred vow. This chart illustrates what happens inside a ruminating mind. Koji's timeline shows a brief spike of effort during the actual crossing, and then immediately drops back to zero. But Ryu's line does the opposite. The moment the physical event ends, his mental exertion starts to climb exponentially. He starts piling on abstract thoughts. First, harsh judgment of Koji. Then, anger over the broken rules. Then, a heavy layer of his own self-righteousness. He is manufacturing a crushing psychological burden out of thin air. By the time the sun began to set, Ryu finally hit his breaking point. He exploded, demanding to know how Koji could betray their order and carry a woman. Here is the striking paradox. Ryu spent hours enduring absolute mental torture over a rule he never even broke, while the actual rule breaker had suffered nothing. Koji stopped walking. He turned to face his furious companion, meeting that explosive anger with profound, untroubled calmness. He looked at Ryu and asked a simple question. "Brother, I set the woman down at the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" Koji took on a physical weight for a few seconds when it was necessary and let it go immediately. Ryu chose to pick up a permanent mental weight and drag it for miles. Ryu believed his strict adherence to the rules proved his discipline. In reality, that rigidity trapped him in an endless mental loop, completely destroying his spiritual peace. True discipline isn't about performing outward perfection. It is the internal ability to recognize when something no longer serves you and having the strength to simply put it down. Most of us have our own version of the woman at the river. It might be an argument with a friend who has already moved on, or a past failure that we continue to drag into our present life. This chart outlines the cognitive shift required to stop that loop. When you catch yourself ruminating on a past event, you have to pause and ask Koji's question, "Am I physically still there?" If the answer is no, the only logical next step is to drop the mental weight. Refusing to let go of a past grievance doesn't rewrite history. It doesn't punish them, it doesn't fix mistakes. It only actively damages the person you are right now. So take an honest look at what you are dragging around. Tell me down in the comments below, what is one specific burden from your past that you know you need to put down today? You don't need a massive breakthrough to stop suffering over what is already gone. True peace begins the exact second you refuse to carry the past into the present.